Well, let's bring in our guest now. Joining us from Gaza City is Ahmed Abu Asker, an engineering student who lobbies for sponsorship for orphans in Gaza. Dan Perry is in Tel Aviv. He is a former chief editor of the Associated Press in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. He is also the publisher of Ask Questions Later on Substack. And Khan Ross is a former British diplomat at the United Nations and author of There We Are Human Again, a diplomat's journey to anarchism. He joins us from London. Thank you so much for being with us here on Inside Story. Dan, if I can begin with you, is the way that Israel is handling these flotillas, this one in particular, with what happened on board when they were detained and their treatment afterwards, as well as Ben-Gvir's videos and his comments, is that really just giving the flotilla and the activists more prominence, more media attention, and actually working against what Israel's trying to achieve here?
Yes, without a shadow of a doubt. It was unbelievably foolish. There's a debate in Israel about whether it's wise to intercept the flotillas, and mightn't it be better to let them arrive in Gaza and see for themselves the situation in Gaza under the boot of Hamas. The reason not to do that is because a blockade, to be internationally acceptable, needs to be either total or none at all. That's the argument, at least. There is no debate in Israel that I know of about the wisdom of mistreating them, at least not in any significant way. Now, Ben-Gvir is clearly an absolute disgrace. He has been condemned, and not only by much of the international community, and now Italy wants him to be sanctioned. My suspicion is he will, by the EU. But by almost the entire mainstream political landscape in Israel, including the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who now faces calls to fire Ben-Gvir. And you know what? I wouldn't be terribly surprised if he did, because whereas until a few days ago, Ben-Gvir might have controlled the fate of the coalition, because it's a narrow coalition and Ben-Gvir's party can bring it down. That no longer matters. Elections are going to be held by October anyway. They went through a little cedar yesterday of dissolving the Knesset in the first or preliminary round of voting in order to pretend like it fell apart, and Netanyahu is at loggerheads with his less popular allies, particularly the ultra-religious Haredim. Who knows? Maybe he'll try to manufacture a fight with Ben-Gvir over this issue. Ben-Gvir handed it to him.
Okay. Khan, if we can come to you next to get Europe's reaction and the UK's reaction. More and more countries are summoning Israeli diplomats over the treatment of these activists. Do you think that it's actually genuine outrage at what has happened here, or is basically summoning an ambassador or diplomat just the equivalent of a strongly worded letter that really doesn't change anything?
I don't think it changes anything, particularly when dealing with this Israeli government and this particular Israeli minister. In fact, for Ben-Gvir, I think international outrage is part of his aim. It serves his purposes. It shows he's pushing the envelope of acceptability, that he's acting, aggressively for his beliefs, his behavior during the abuse of the detainees. I think also demonstrate that the language that he used, which is kind of settler colonial language, to respond to that merely by calling in the ambassador, which many European countries have done, is clearly completely inadequate. It's not going to stop this behavior, but it's also not going to stop the broader abuse of Palestinian prisoners within the Israeli prison system, which in a way, this abuse of international detainees is symbolic of that broader treatment of Palestinians. It reveals the reality of Israeli prisons for Arabs.
Okay, speaking of the reality for Palestinians in Gaza, Ahmed, that's obviously where we find you at this point in time. This flotilla is all designed to help you in one way or another, either by actually getting aid to you or to bringing attention to the Palestinian plight and what is happening in Gaza. What's been the reaction, not only by yourself, but other people in Gaza to these flotillas?
First of all, I'm so glad to be here. I want to speak about the media pressure. In late of 2024, we were going through the worst period of our lives. For me, for myself, I didn't eat for like 3 days, and nothing was entering Gaza. I mean food. But due the strong media pressure, Israel opened Karm Shalom crossing to allow food in because of that media pressure. The maritime flotillas are also playing a similar role. It highlights the situation in Gaza, and in reality, we do not see much aid entering because of Israel policy for sure. But the world is able to see what is happening in Gaza because of these flotillas.
Okay, Dan, if we can come back to you, obviously there are going to be repercussions, like you say, potentially for Ben Gvir. Do you think that this was all designed by him as political theatre to gain him, I guess, more attention, more notoriety in the lead up to elections in October? And will it work if that is the case?
Again, yes. What Karn said is absolutely true. This is his brand. His brand is to be a firebrand. He first came to prominence in Israel as a teenager in 1995 when he brandished Prime Minister Rabin's hood ornament and said, "We got to his car, we can get to him." And a few months later, a fellow traveler actually did and assassinated Rabin. Israel's politicians all, pretend like Ben Gvir is an anomaly, but the fact is, to your question, he's going to get about 1/10 of the vote. And possibly a little bit more, because he represents a growing faction of the Israeli right that is sort of tired of speaking nicely to the world with euphemisms about security concerns and economic peace and so forth, the way Netanyahu tries to do. It's a little bit of a sleight of hand, and Ben Gvir believes that respect comes from strength, and that liberal Western notions of politesse and diplomacy are for losers, basically. And yeah, it has an audience in Israel. It has an audience for sure because of the traumas that they've endured and the unfairness that they think they continue to endure and how the world portrays them and their actions and shows too little understanding, they would say. And this is not limited to the far right of Israel's need to defend itself against jihadist militias on almost every border. The irony, of course, is that the more Israel acts that way because they feel like they may as well, the worse the reputational damage is. It's a vicious circle.
Khan, do you think that these flotillas are actually helping the likes of Ben Gvir gain more attention, more notoriety, that he can do these performative stunts, take these videos, potentially gain more popularity within Israel, that is actually working against the Palestinian people, which is obviously what the flotillas are designed to do?
No, I don't think that's right. I think that actually the flotilla and the treatment of the activists on the flotilla is very helpful because it reveals a reality. The Israeli foreign minister has said this isn't what Israel is, that Ben Gvir is not representing what Israel truly is. But the trouble is he is. The treatment that Ben Gvir is giving those international activists is exactly the treatment that Palestinians are receiving inside Israeli prisons. In fact, Palestinians are treated far worse. There is, you can see that from the evidence of the many deaths in Israeli captivity, including of children, and the reports of the systematic use of violence and indeed sexual violence inside Israeli prisons. This has been documented by the UN and by many independent human rights organizations. So in a sense, we're seeing actually a glimpse, a crack of the door into what is really going on inside Israeli prisons. What Ben Gvir has done is not some kind of anomaly or aberration. Remember, this is the minister who was in charge of prisons in Israel. So his behavior is not, the action of a kind of renegade minister. It is what the Israeli state is doing.
Ahmed, you obviously hear and see these world leaders speak out, condemn Israel's actions here, but nothing changes in Gaza. How does that make you feel?
It feel like I'm so depressed. I'm angry. I can't tell you how I feel because it's really complicated. Like for 3 years, nothing changed. Like my father is still a cancer patient and still doesn't get out of this war area, genocide. It's a mix of feelings. Like angry, depression. We have not seen any real change in the ground for 3 years. The cross are still closed, but still we have hope. Like someday one of these flotillas will comes in and can take my father out of this area to we can take care of him. I'm sorry.
Well, speaking of these flotillas, we just want to run through the brief history of them. Israel actually intensified its blockade of Gaza back in 2007 when Hamas came to power, restricting the entry of goods, even water and electricity. The following year, flotillas began delivering humanitarian aid by sea. It was the only year that boats successfully reached the Strip. Then in 2010, the Israeli army intercepted the Gaza Freedom Flotilla. Soldiers stormed a Turkish ship and killed 10 activists. Well, more flotillas set sail between 2011 and 2018, trying to break Israel's siege. None were successful. Then efforts intensified again in 2024 during Israel's genocide and the closure of all entry points, which led to a famine. All were intercepted and forced to turn back, which is where we find ourselves today. Dan, you've obviously covered many of these flotillas and obviously what's happened in Gaza over the last several years. The flotillas, have they become a ritual that both sides know the choreography to at this point in time? Are they more performative than anything else right now?
I think for the third time, my answer to your question is yes. They're obviously a ritual and they're obviously a stunt. And the amount of aid they're carrying in, whenever they really are carrying aid, is not what's going to save the Gazans. Moreover, when aid comes in, whether the activists are treated well or mistreated, the idea is that then it's sent on to Gaza. And I know not enough aid is getting through. I think, of course, it's a performance that stems from the overall issue, which is not theatrical, which is that Israel fears a Hamas-run Gaza because Hamas exists to attack Israel. And that's the reason for the blockade. That, by the way, is not just Israel's, but also Egypt's from the south. It's a catastrophe. And as I listen here to Ahmed on our panel, it's heartbreaking. It's obvious you can see what he's gone through. But if he could speak freely, I strongly suspect, I'm not putting words in his mouth, that he would say that he wishes Hamas would leave, as we know that the majority of Gazans want. So, of course, humanitarian aid should get in, but really, Gaza should have a regular economy with commerce with Israel and Egypt. And that cannot happen as long as Hamas is there. So all these well-meaning people who support the Palestinians, and I support the Palestinians, probably would do well to encourage implementation of, probably Donald Trump's only successful diplomatic effort so far in all his terms, which was the ceasefire from September in Gaza, which includes Hamas disarming. And, we're going to have a lot more of these panels talking about tragedies and iniquities unless that eventually comes to pass. And this is the be-all and end-all of everything. The flotillas are a reflection of what is a true catastrophe.
Ahmed, if we can bring you back in now, can you just give us an idea of how little aid is getting in, how dire, despite the ceasefire, how hard are things for people there right now?
It's very hard. The situation here is really hard. Like I told you before, in 2025, 2024, we have nothing to eat, nothing. And because of the media pressure, the Israel forced to open Karm Abu Salim again. And for me, the Israel, not Hamas, they are the one who killed my sister, killed their children and their entire family in 6 November 2023. Not Hamas, not everything. We are not Hamas here.
Khan, obviously...
Not all of Palestinian people are Hamas, because everything, why we are in the blockade, because of Hamas. Why we can get out. This is my right to get out, to get whatever I want. No, it's Hamas. Why the goods, why it's not entering? Because of Hamas. We are not Hamas. We are a human in the end.
Dan, I see you want to jump back in.
I would say again, all my sympathies go to Ahmed, and I have friends in the Gaza Strip, and I used to have staff in the Gaza Strip. and it's just a tragic situation. Yes, Israel killed members of his family, and that's horrible. But I suspect he knows that the war was started by Hamas. And it was started by Hamas in a way that was so epically brutal that Israel concluded it has no choice but to try to uproot Hamas. And that is the reason why Israel has been waging military activity in Gaza. I mean, and people die in these wars. Now, people in Gaza cannot speak freely. I mean, our audience is not naive. They know that. If Ahmed here were to criticize Hamas, they would kill him.
But also,
this is the
Dan,
reality for
our
people in
audience
Gaza.
isn't so naive to think that this started on October the 7th, 2023. The blockade, as we laid out before, started way back in 2008. So this goes back way
Indeed.
before then. If we can get back onto the flotilla argument, Khan, despite Europe's condemnation of what has gone on, nothing has changed. At some point, doesn't this European condemnation without any sort of consequence actually become a part of the problem rather than part of the solution?
I agree. The condemnation of Israel's conduct in this case and in many other cases is formulaic. I don't think it makes the slightest bit of difference. The only thing that would make any difference are substantive sanctions on the Israeli government. There are some limited sanctions on Ben-Gvir himself, though there are not EU-wide sanctions because various EU member states have blocked that. But I think, it's clear that this behavior, and indeed the language around it, the language that Ben-Gvir uses, is part of the colonialist project that is going on in Israel to expand the territory that Israel holds in Gaza, the West Bank, and indeed beyond. And the only way to stop that is through clear, powerful sanctions on Israel itself, ideally not on the people of Israel, but on the state of Israel, which is perpetrating this. This should not be seen as just a kind of one-off incident perpetrated by a kind of extremist. It is actually much more indicative of systematic abuses and behaviors by Israel itself.
Do you want to see more flotillas? Or do you think that there's another way to bring attention and aid to people in Gaza like yourself?
Like speaking about Gaza on social media, also make a social pressure. Like we learned from the maritime flotillas that even if they did not succeed and fully deliver aid, they were still very important. They brought global attention to Gaza and highlighted the humanitarian situation in a way that could not be ignored. They helped put Gaza on the international agenda and showed the reality on the ground to the world through media and public awareness, public pressure, sorry. We also remember that 10 people were killed during one of these flotillas, and they were activists who tried to break the blockade and deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza. They should be remembered as people who try to help and stand with civilians in very difficult situations.
Dan, this most likely won't be the last flotilla. Do you think that Israel cares about the international condemnation that's come out in the last couple of days at all? And do you think that they're going to handle any future flotillas differently?
Well, as you know, and as in every country, there's more than one point of view in Israel. Ben-Gvir cares about it. He loves it. The more you condemn him and the more you sanction him, the more he figures he can, play the victim and maybe get a few more votes. That's the sad reality with the extreme populist right in any country. The government feels embarrassed and wishes it would all go away. The opposition is opposed to the government's policies. Now, the bigger picture here is that the opposition may well be the government as of October, because Israel has to hold elections by then, and Netanyahu is far behind in the polls. That's a whole different complexity, what he's going to do, what he's capable of doing to avoid defeat. But an Israel ruled by the opposition, the current opposition, will be far more moderate, far more pragmatic, far more inclined to seek exit ramps from the war and ways to achieve peace and many other things that will be no longer a government that tries to Putinize the country and turn it into an elected autocracy. So the reality might change, but if a flotilla should come next month, and Ben-Gvir is still the police minister or the national security minister, which, as I say, he might not be if Bibi chooses to fire him as part of some theater, then probably nothing will change. The grander strategy of whether Israel is going to start letting people through into Gaza is something I don't think they're going to do that, because that would constitute effectively under international law, an end of the blockade. And they're not prepared to end the blockade as long as Hamas is in power in Gaza. And the fact that Hamas remains in power in the inner core of Gaza, half of it, the populated half, is a devastating failure of the Israeli strategy in the war. And to let the flotillas through would be an admission of that.
Khan, we've heard words of condemnation from many world leaders, but what action do you think that they should take now? Sanctions? What else can they do or should they be doing?
Well, I think the distressing thing and disappointing thing about the world's reaction to this incident is that the world has not reacted so vociferously or so immediately to much worse abuse that has been visited on Palestinian prisoners, and indeed the people of Palestine, people in Gaza, and of course the West Bank. I regard the blockade of Gaza by Israel as a kind of act of violence on the Palestinian people. It's not true that the aid that is meant to go to Gaza can be used by Hamas. Israel is stopping humanitarian aid, reconstruction materials, etc., etc. It continues to occupy more than half of Gaza's territory. These are indications, I think, of a policy that we saw during the active military campaign against Gaza, a policy of making life in Gaza intolerable, with the hope that the Palestinians, or with the aim that the Palestinian people will abandon the territory.
Right.
That is genocide, that is occupation.
Ahmed, if we can give you the last word here on Inside Story today, if there's one thing that would make a difference to your life tomorrow, what would it be? What can the international community do in the immediate term, do you think?
Open the border. Open the border. Open it. So we can go out.
It's as simple as that.
We can come in. Yeah, it's simple like that. I'm going to mention something. Like isn't about 7 October, not begin 7 October. Like your guest always mention, it's because of Hamas, it's because of 7 October. Believe me, if Israel did something to us, I won't kill Israeli babies. I won't let them starving. Even if I do something wrong to anyone in this world, to any human being. This is not right. And he knows that. The reality 100%. I'm really sorry about that.
Ahmed Abu Asker, Dan Perry and Khan Ross. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate your time today